Hello and welcome to ImpactEd. I'm HD Chambers, Superintendent of Schools for Alief ISD. And as usual, I want to express appreciation for those of you that are going to be watching this episode or listening to it. And hopefully it provides you some insight into parts, very, very significant portions and parts of our community here in Alief. As many of you know that listen or watch our podcast, recently we've been having conversations with a variety of individuals that represent certain cultures and certain backgrounds within our Alief community. I'll set the stage for those that are not familiar or just need to be reminded. Alief is, by data, the most diverse school system in the most diverse community in the state of Texas. We have roughly 90 different languages that are spoken in our schools. And then we have obviously multiple cultures, backgrounds, religions, beliefs, ethnicities, you name it. And one of the things that makes me really, really proud to have served as superintendent for 10 years is watching how that diversity truly does benefit our students and benefit our community. Not all communities can say that. So today in that vein, I've asked two guests who are very, very instrumental in our community, from our Asian community. And I want to introduce Miss Katherine Cheng and Mr. Ben Yu. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves. But our topic today, what we're going to talk about is kind of the experience that the Asian community has experienced since COVID, and even before COVID, but since COVID, and the way in which it's impacted many of our Vietnamese and our Chinese and our South Korean and our Japanese citizens, our community members that represent many of the Pacific Rim and the Pacific Islander population. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you, Katherine. Maybe introduce yourself and just real quickly what you do. And then Ben, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll start this conversation.
Hi, everyone. I am Katherine. I'm with a company called Houston Event Planning and Signature Manor. We've actually located in the Alief area since 2003. Very active in the community with the Houston Asian JC Foundation and Houston International JCs. So we love being in Alief and serving the community. And also our business loves being a part of that family.
Thank you, Katherine. And Ben?
Yeah, hi, this is Bing Yu. I'm the chairman for Asian Chamber of Commerce. And like Mr. Chairman said, we are actually in the district too, because it's such diversity district, and we're very proud to have a headquarters in that district as well.
Thank you. And just so y'all know, today as we're recording this, Ben and part of his organization has been giving vaccines out to many in the Asian community through various organizations. And I will tell you, Katherine, I know our school district is taking advantage of Signature Manor and use that facility for multiple events. So the partnership between the school system and the Asian community is strong. For the listeners, roughly 13 to 14% of our student population are from our Asian backgrounds. And so we have many family members, many parents, and a tremendous amount of commerce through the district, through the International Management District, and through a variety of business and commerce support drivers in our community. But let's talk. I want to start now, guys, with let's go back to COVID for a second and go back to March. Actually, a year ago today, or
yep.
March 11th, March 12th. I remember closing school. on March the 12th for the 13th, making the decision, and then the next week was our spring break. And I remember thinking, we'll probably get away, get through with spring break, and then maybe have to be out of school for another week. But by the end of March, we'll have kids back and everything will be back to normal. Man, was I wrong there. But in the course of this, as we learn more about this virus, it became apparent to me that there was a lot of people blaming China, like China as a country and then China as a people. and I'd like for you, Ben, if you don't mind, maybe talk a little bit about how that impacted the community, the Asian community, the businesses, and fast forward 12 months later, has it changed? Is it any better? And then obviously, Katherine, please chime in from a business person's perspective. So Ben, talk about that a little bit, please.
So that's a very good question. That's a very important question, and how the impact to the Asian community. Actually, is if you remember, the impact to the Asian community actually started before the U.S. pandemic. That started in January, early February last year, and that time was a rumor that hurt our community quite a bit, because a rumor talk about this the virus from China came to Chinatown, and we have a couple of grocery store and a few restaurants, and hurt by the rumor, by the Twitter and by the Facebooks, and that impact our business significantly that time. And that time we have a restaurants have to force to close. We have a grocery store business dropped 70% by the rumor. And what I feel pretty touched is the Houston, the mayor, and the Harris County, the judge. They all came to the Chinatown and tried to educate the people about the virus and tell the people how to face in the rumor. So I would say the Asian community, from impact standpoint, have some got educated earlier than that.
Were there? I'm curious, Ben. Was most of the business lost? Was it lost as a result of Asians not visiting there, or was it your non-Asian population that wasn't going to the stores or going to the restaurants?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the most business impacted by the Asian not come to the Asian stores. As a matter of fact, what saved the Chinatown, that's where I want to talk about later on, is how the Asian contribute back. Because what saved the Chinatown that time is actually there's a lot of non-Asians and the people from other communities, that other ethnicities, they actually came to Chinatown to shop, to eat, to give a confidence to that community. And that we as Asian in that the district feel really touched. Yeah.
Good. Katherine, you run a business, and I'm curious, did you experience any of what Ben just described that was going on in many parts of the Asian community?
Well, we were impacted a little differently because, for example, last year to this year, we had an 87% loss from the year prior. So it was drastic. But ours was mainly because of the hospitality and the shutdown, and you couldn't have events, and we went down to 25%, 50%. I've been doing LSEC High School's prom for like 13 years. We're moving to prom. This is the second year. So it was more of the effects of COVID with us. We do have people that come in tours and things like that, but the challenging part wasn't necessarily the ethnicity issue. It was more like the virus is here. How do we keep people safe? Even with the 87% loss that our company did, we didn't want to lay off anybody. Like, we felt so strongly that we rather get loans, kept our crew together because they're vested, just like we were vested in the company. And even though we were at a huge loss last year, we still initially, we spent money out of our community funds to do a mass drive-through for senior citizens of the Alief community, and also distribute food multiple times with multiple organizations just to help out. Because if our community as a whole, Alief and then Houston and then Texas, is healthy, then our economy will get back, and then our business will become to flourish again. So we're just holding on to make sure that when everything gets back to the new norm, we can go back to celebrating, having that wonderful prom that I've been dying to do for LSEC in 2022.
They're dying to do it too. I know. It's
And I want to add on Katherine's point that when the pandemic happened, truly started in the US, in Houston, like Katherine said, I feel pretty bad for Katherine business. They're our member and they supporting us all the time, but they're 87 drop, and that's a significant. And we have I would say it's a large number. I would say majority of the business may not be as big as Katherine, but they all got impacted, especially in those restaurant business, hospitality business, and customer service oriented business, their business got suffered so big. So yeah.
Ben, do you have a feel for how many businesses had to go out of business or how many were not able to overcome this?
Yeah, we have about 140 restaurant owners, and we see about, I would say it's probably 15% restaurant, they just couldn't survive, and then they I would say 15 to 20%, and all the year until the end of last year, they changed ownership or closed down or sold their business, and the hotel business, I think even suffered more. In our Asian, we are members in especially the Southwest district. There are about 6-7 hotel owners, and they have to post their hotels either shut down or put on the market. And some of them are still in the closed period. So to give you that one example, that now is this business starting to rebound. One of the issue is we couldn't find some hotels, they because they still close, so we couldn't find the owners anymore. We used to work with them before.
Right.
Yeah.
I just driving around the community, driving down, and for those who are not familiar with Alief, but those of you who are, driving down Bel Air Boulevard and on I guess on the west side of the Sam Houston Toll Road is mainly Vietnamese business, mainly Vietnamese community, the community, and I guess on the east side or the inside of the toll road, it becomes a much more of a Chinese culture, a lot of Chinatown. Did both of those parts of town get treated the same? In other words, did they both suffer significant losses equally, or did you see one over the other? I'm asking because of the Chinese, the so much attention was given to the Chinese issue on this. So did the Vietnamese community suffer similar from a business perspective?
Yes, we have the member in the international district, which is heavily Vietnamese the district, and then on the other side of Beltway, that's more Chinese. I from my conversation with our members, they all cross the border, impacted very similar way. It's especially the restaurant business, and the Asians very cautious, and the Vietnamese and the Chinese, they all very cautious to go out, and that's where it's what I heard is very similar. Yeah.
Katherine, have you in your business, are you beginning to see light at the end of the proverbial tunnel here, and with a little bit of the policy decisions and with vaccines being predominantly, more and more prevalent? What is your outlook?
Well, it's getting a lot more positive. I'm seeing more people coming out, inquiring, actually doing weddings or doing events. This is a very stressful time, and I don't think people realize how mental stress and emotion and the lack of people contact affects the individual, because I'm in the business of celebrating and having a good time, and weddings and proms and conferences where people gather. So the last year, what I've been doing is being a therapist. You know how many couples broke up? I mean, I had over 28% of my couples that didn't postpone their wedding. They canceled their wedding because they don't get along anymore. They moved
Really?
in, COVID
Really?
happened. They both stayed home and decided, I can't deal with you. I was going to marry you, and it was okay that you went to work and I went to work. But now that I have to see you 24 hours a day, I don't think I want to marry you anymore. I mean, I had therapy sessions for that. I had people that were doing anniversaries, celebrating their 25th anniversary, that came to my office and broke down and started crying, going, I've been planning this for 5 years with you, and now we can't celebrate that moment. And unfortunately, they had COVID and their family issues, and people passed away. And I was sitting there as a therapist, no longer an event planner. And I mean, even high school seniors, this is their prom, this is their moment. They couldn't do it. And you can't redo a prom a year later because you can't get all the kids back anyways. So they lost that opportunity. And it's just very drastic. And we see something better now. We're seeing more couples that said, it's okay. We survived for a year. We better get married soon because I don't know how long I'm going to live. I might as well take this opportunity to marry you. We see those too. They're getting married in a month from now.
Wow.
But on top of COVID, our area just had a freeze. I mean, who would have thought Houston would have a freeze? And pipes burst. We didn't have power for 3 days. I mean, water was a challenge. I had a 350-person wedding that Saturday. I had to postpone for 2 weeks, which she ended up crying, upset. And then once we did the wedding, she was the happiest person alive. I mean, COVID's bad. Business is horrible. Freeze, all these challenges. But at the end of the day, I think 2022 is going to be better. And I think our lives together will become better once we can go see our friends and family and do that huggy thing that, or a handshake thing that we like to do in the future. But right now it's still slowly crawling through recovery.
I never once thought about the impact on your business with people making decisions that perhaps they wouldn't have made before because they didn't know each other as well. And there's I know we kind of smiled and raised our eyebrows when you made that comment. At least I did. But it's a serious. That's actually a real thing that I never thought about that. This, I think all of us have recognized something that you mentioned earlier, Ben, about people coming in and helping you guys, helping the Asian community try to restore faith and confidence in a restaurant or at a grocery store, and deflect this blame that a lot of people so easily want to apply to anything. That if there's a problem, we can find out whose fault it is, it'll make us feel better about it. And that, I feel like that was done to the particularly the Chinese community in particular, because of the way the media reported out on the virus. I'd like y'all's comments on what you've seen, where people of different backgrounds are coming together. You kind of alluded to it, Ben, but talk about that and the good side of it and the not so good side of it. I mean, there's both. So I'd like to have a conversation, if we could, around that, and either one of you guys can start on your perspectives.
Yep, absolutely. So if I may add the question you have is what is how impact the Asian business, and then answer your question on how we come together helping others. In our we think probably 20% of the restaurant business got impacted, closed for sale, and also we also have probably 50% of the hotel business owners, they will struggle a lot. And we have a couple of members, they are the business brokers, and they told us that they're the restaurants, hotels, and also service business, like marketing firms, event firms like Katherine, they were in the all-time high in the market, and they just a lot of business for sale. That's what they told us. And but I would like to mention one important thing part is even though a lot of Asian business, they were impacted, but when there's a COVID hit hard in our community, and the Asian business, doesn't matter Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, or other ethnicities, Asian business, they all come together facing that, and then they want to work with all other ethnicities to facing the COVID. It doesn't matter if this is Chinese or this is other communities. And so we give an example, we launched this initiative called Asian American Salute Frontline Heroes. So we got hundreds of volunteers and the donation from 100 restaurants. And we actually want to help in restaurant, but we were surprised that those restaurants, they already suffered, but they all stood up and joined these alliances about this Asian American Salute program. And we donated over 15,000 meals to the hospital. We covered almost like all the hospitals, Methodist, Herman, you named MD Anderson, and 15,000 meals also goes to the fire stations, go to the police department, and then go to the communities, the government, to who in the front line serving the community, and the campaign. And it was so successful, and we were pretty touched how the Asian come together and then appreciate and also helping the front lines. That's where I give you that. I think it's a good example.
There's a lot of lessons to be learned over the last year, and one of them, which you alluded to, was when you go through a crisis, one of the things we learn is what groups, what people, what organizations are going to be there when things get difficult. There's all kinds of sayings around this, but I feel like we've all been pressure tested. If you're an engineer, you kind of know before they turn something on, they test it to make sure there's no weaknesses in a valve or in a joint or in a coupling and a connection. And if there is, they fix it. Well, we've been pressure tested through this process. With that in mind, where do you think within the Asian community the pressure test has been successful, and where do you think it has not been successful? In other words, where has the pressure been so great that it actually caused problems? When you have businesses like you were referring to, when you have restaurants and you have grocery stores that are beginning to suffer loss in sales, loss in revenue, can't pay bills, cannot pay their staff, their employees. Some businesses are built to try to overcome that. Like some businesses the pressure that's being put on them, they've been prepared for that. Whereas there are some that have not been. They're either the pressure was so great that they couldn't overcome it, or the pressure was such that they chose not to overcome it. They just said, "I'm not going to. It's not worth it. I can't salvage this." So that when I'm thinking about pressure, it's just all of these things that hit at one time. And Katherine mentioned it. You have COVID, you've got a freeze. We were threatened by a hurricane back in the fall, early fall. All these things that have occurred have created all kinds of pressures on us.
Yeah.
All kinds, personally, family. So I'm just.
So let me answer that one, because I can tell you I've cried at least more than 600 times in the last year because of this pressure. Because for me as an individual, I have 14 staff members and their family members that I need to take care of. If the business folds or if I made a bad decision, they don't have income, and who are the ones that are going to support them? On top of that, I'm in charge of people's special moments. I don't want to be one of those venues like Noah and some of the others that are not going to fulfill their contracts and do their events. So it's a lot of pressure for us. But on the same side, I still have to pay our mortgage, our taxes, our payroll, our power bill, that sometimes we get power, sometimes we don't, but I still have to pay those bills. And that's a lot of pressure for us. So fortunately, I'm also part of the chamber. Luckily, I get information about the SBA loans. Like Ben's group is really great at sending out not only information, but resources or who to talk to or web seminars on how to apply for these things. Because for me, I can throw a wonderful party, an event, prom, anything. But when it comes to how do you apply for a disaster loan? How do you apply for an EDIL? Or how do you get that PPP? And because I'm a small business, can I even get it? Because all the big companies are getting all this money. And can I even get the little crumbs to just sustain the business and take care of my staff, because they're my core of my business? So there's a lot of pressure out there, but fortunately, at least in my experience with being a resource, Asian Chamber of Commerce was that resource to get the information, because I could design an amazing event, but when it comes to finance and business and the new resources during crisis, this is a major crisis.
Yeah.
But how we prepare, because our company's been around since 2003, for more than decades. We've been through the 9/11, the financial crash, the real estate crash. I mean, we're in this celebratory business and people gathering. So we always kept reserves every year because we're waiting for the next disaster. We noticed that every 4 to 5 years, there's something that's going to go wrong. We just didn't realize it was this bad. We can handle 20, 30%, no big deal, but no one expects to be a 87% loss because of governor's order of 25% go down, you know? So yes, that's how we dealt with the pressure. And fortunately, Ben's chamber is the resource that made it a little bit better, you know, and easier for us and our staff.
No, you didn't feel like you were on your own. You didn't feel like you were by yourself, which is provides some comfort. Doesn't pay the bills, but it provides some comfort.
It does, because it shows that there is a possible solution. It might not be the solution for the future, but being able to pay payroll for another 2 months is awesome for my staff.
Right.
Even though I had no events, sometimes I still wanted to make sure they sustained, because you know it was important to us. We treat our employees like family, and just like you do, I know the Alief family is really big, and you guys took care of everyone as well. I know one of my staff members that recently became a widow went through your food lines too. Remember when you guys were having food lines in Alief? Well, she has a son in Alief that goes to school there, and she went through the food lines as well, because at that time it was just tough. Money was tough everywhere. So that's how we resolved the pressure.
And I really appreciate Katherine comments on the, treat the chamber as a resource hub. And just the pressure in the beginning when this happened is extremely high for almost all the members. Managing cash flow is already pretty tight because it's all restaurant, hotels, and business. So any other manufacturers, we have a trade company, tourist company. They all stopped business basically. So managing cash flow, but like you said, it's not just the business stuff, but everything else just coming together at the same time. How to keep the safety. Number one, like Katherine said, is how to keep your employee on the payroll. And because as Katherine is they're 87% down, but they still keep everybody on the payroll. And that, how to figure it out, how to manage that. I think that's come with the chamber played a role is to work with SBA, work with the different governmental entities to make sure, calm down. We are here to help and help in terms of, we have many webinars, education, workshops, and work with SBA. We actually create a mentor program to helping the small business walk them through the whole PPP applications. And so just basically get them to the hurdle. I think, Katherine, what you feel that the second PPP, we feel that the business owner, they feel a lot, I don't say relaxed, but they feel a lot comfortable, and they feel that they're not the nervous as attention like the first one that they had. So.
I do like the fact that this PPP was more geared towards smaller businesses, because Shake Shack and all the big businesses, they really, I mean, public traded companies were getting more money than we were. And the first time PPP, we couldn't even get anything. Like, they didn't even submit our application because everybody else took everything, so quickly. So it was better this time that it was the micro businesses like us getting a chance before the big giants take everything.
And if I may champion the PPP from SBA, from the government, it helps a lot. I would have to say the city Houston and Harris County, they stood up as well, because there are many very small business. They're much smaller than Katherine's business, a one-person shop, mama papa shop. They don't know how to maintain a record. The only thing they have is a bank statements, and but they are the one. Most time is either not qualified or they don't know how to apply. So I really appreciate that the city and the county, their economic department stood up, and we partnered with them and apply this grant from the city and county, helping those very small businesses. Actually, we have a dozen members receive those grants, and they can't thank enough.
it was definitely no, the first tranche of money didn't get down to you. I know several people that are small business owners and very close to one in particular that couldn't compete when you've got Fortune 500 companies
Mhm.
that are, like you said earlier, they're getting more of the food in the food trough than, and it's all gone after after a short period of time. I would like, as we kind of close this up, I'd like to go back to where we started with this, which is when the virus made its way to the United States of America, and then the media began reporting the origins of it, or at least what they thought were the origins of it, which was Wuhan, and and then people began taking out their frustrations on Chinese communities or Asian communities, restaurants, etc., including Asians. Uh, I'd like to kind of go full circle. So here we are, 12 months later, and we're still in the virus is still here. It's not gone, and as more and more variants and more mutations of the virus get out the into the public, um, until we get herd immunity or some significant percent of our population vaccinated, we'll probably continue to live much like we're living right now. Do you see the um, do you see the perception that people that non-Asians have of Asians, has that evolved, improved? Because I know if you've paid attention to the media in the last week, there have been more and more hate crimes uh, towards people of Asian persuasion. And um, I'm just wondering, what are you seeing in our community? Is it still to that extent? Is it not? If it is, um, how can we talk about that? How can we, not just the three of us, but how can this be a conversation that has the same type of status and the same type of effect as perhaps what our country's been going through for the last 12 months with social injustice, racial injustice, etc.?
So let me answer that in two part, okay? In the beginning of COVID, I can tell you it was a struggle being an Asian American, especially even I live in the Cyprus area. So even going to the grocery store, my mother is, came from Taiwan. So she's, oh, COVID's happening. So please make sure you wear a mask everywhere. At that time, it wasn't mandated. So I still wore a mask because my mother told me, of course, being a good daughter. But when you go to a grocery store with a mask and you look Asian, they just assume you have COVID in the very beginning. So you get a lot of very interesting looks. People walk away from you. It's just like I had the plague, even though it was something that was protecting them and myself. Eventually, I had to change a little bit of my shopping habits, and I Instacarted everything because I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable.
Wow.
So I changed that a little bit. And as I talked to nieces, nephews, colleagues, children, they had the same issue too when they're in school or in daycare, where as Asian Americans, a lot of our family members know to wear masks. They're used to that in Asian countries to wear masks. In
That's not
China and Taiwan, it's common.
yeah, it's not uncommon. I remember seeing Asians in downtown Houston wearing masks well before COVID. And
It's
so,
Exactly. So that was common for us. So it wasn't that we wore a mask because we were sick. We wore a mask because we weren't protected against pollution or, COVID or any kind of strain or whatever. But when you see someone with a mask, you just assume they're sick. And that's what the misconception was. So a lot of these younger kids were not bullied, but kind of like put to a corner. You're sick, so we don't want to be near you because you have the China virus, or you have the plague, or my mommy says don't be around you because you have a mask on. But that isn't the case. It's hard for younger children to understand why their friends are not playing with them, or why do I have to wear this mask, mom, when everybody thinks there's something wrong with me. So that was initially. So a lot of the people around it that's been doing it was tough. And once the mandate came and about, it was a struggle. People didn't want to wear their mask, and for a lot of the Asian community, it was important that we did to keep us safe. So that transition was hard to become acceptable. Where just Wednesday now, the governor says everybody can take off their mask. Now we're all scared. Even in our establishment, we still require them to wear a mask because we're scared still. Not 50% of the people in Houston are not vaccinated. And most of my staff are in their 30s. they're not going to get vaccinated for a while. It's just because of their age, but they're still afraid because we're doing events. The governor says back to 100%, but we're like, I don't want to make my people sick. I don't want to make people sick. So that was a challenge. And as things progressed now, we're not as bad as California, New York, thank goodness, especially in our little area of Houston, where an 84-year-old senior citizen was just walking on the street, and because he was Asian, they didn't like him, they pushed him. He hit his head, and later on he passed away just because he was a senior citizen, vulnerable, and the person didn't like them because he was Asian. And there was a 64-year-old during Lunar New Year. We give out red envelopes. We go to the bank. So a lot of our Asian Americans or seniors were targeted during that time because they're coming out of the banks and, they have cash and they know where, to get the money, basically. So our Asian American seniors were getting attacked quite a bit nationwide. It was an increase of 150% according to the hate crime study. The Center of Hate and Extreme, they did a study. It was over 150%, over 3,000 reported cases. But I'm sure there's more than 3,000 because a lot of Asian Americans don't like to report crime. That's a big issue with our community. Something happens to us, we just go, oh, it's okay. We'll just leave it alone. It won't happen again. But it does. So those are major issues, that are still happening. So it was extremely challenging with the civil unrest as well. So COVID, civil unrest, ice, or the winter weather, and then again this racial divide.
Right.
As a business owner, I'm surprised no one had a nervous breakdown, right? That's a lot.
They probably did. They just try not to do it in public,
I have a little corner with a pillow.
I know Katherine, you said you counseled a lot of your clients. Ben, I'm sure you had to counsel a lot of your members, your chamber members.
Yes, we do. We actually have form a special alliances committee to do two things. One is to we launched a campaign to educate the mainstream about how the Asian and not just only business Asian people being discriminated, and then there's a lot of put them in dangerous place, and then we put in the ad in the Chronicle and then try to get alliances together to fight for that, And the second thing we do is educate our business owners too, because we do have business owners get really concerned about this whole anti-Asian, anti-China, these things, this China virus, and especially some political politicians using that as their campaign. That's a really target that make them feel very nervous. We do have one restaurant owner in the Vietnamese restaurants at the Buffalo Speedway, and there's one person shouted on him and outside the restaurant for a long time, and then eventually caught by media. And those are the business owner. They got him freaking out. And so it's from business standpoint, how I would say how we make education to the mainstream side. Asian American, they are Americans, and they are good Americans just like other people, and that's a put the respect on them. That's important. That is why when we have this launched a campaign like the Salute campaign, and so many Asian business owners and also the people, they come together because they want to show how they help in the communities, contribute back to the communities, and that's important.
The several weeks ago, I had a ImpactEd episode with an African American teacher at one of our high schools. We talked about the perspective from the African American community and the conversations that our teachers were having with students, particularly our high school age students and middle school students, who on a conscious level knew they were able to figure out what was going on across the country in the during the summer when you had the protests and the civil unrests. And are those conversations being had with children in the Asian community as well? Is there the family unit? The family unit what types of conversations are moms and dads having with their children about some of the things that you described within your community?
Maybe I can throw out that's very good question. It's even at Asian, in talking about the me as the first immigrant to U.S. and my daughter as born in U.S. as the American. So this we definitely have different background. There's different different view. Sometimes we're not always considered always the same. I think my experience the most important is from Asian community, even ourselves, we need to learn each other, learn from the generation, first generation to second generation. And like I learned a lot from my daughter, from her view about how this racism happened. What's her view on how the people should be united together? And because I have my own background, then that's why I feel like I need to, even though she's just 15 years old girl, I can learn a lot from her, which is I did. And sometimes come to with I saw some news about some arguments inside the family, and I think it's important. And it's not Asian is always have the parents say everything has to follow. I think in the U.S. But to learn for me as a first generation, I have to learn a new way to educate my child, and that's I really like that question. It's actually I thought a lot for myself too. Yeah.
Well, as an educator and as a parent myself, and obviously I'm not an immigrant to this country. I mean, entrenched here with my family for decades and decades. But we often find in education that in order for us to be able to help children from these diverse backgrounds, we have to understand their family's culture and what their family's expecting of them, and what they're being asked of by mom and dad, or what the unwritten rule is, the unwritten thing. And asking a teacher to figure that out when a teacher has 24 students and 12 of them are from different countries or different cultures, can be well, it's just impossible. It's hard. It's really difficult. I find it interesting, Ben, you talking about you being an immigrant and your daughter's technically a U.S. citizen born in the United States, and she's probably seen. This is my word. This is not your word, but some of them get Americanized, right? They get they get accustomed to the culture, and then mom and dad are saying, "Wait, there's part of me that was raised this way," and so there's this conflict within the family. I hear that all the time from our not just Asian. I hear that from every ethnic background. It, but it's kids saying that my dad doesn't understand, and but I will say this as well. I'll say this: within the Asian community, within the African American community, within the Latino community, for those families that have made the sacrifices to come to our country, and far better than I do what those are. I'm under no illusion that I can relate to that, but I am constantly impressed. I'm not surprised. I'm constantly impressed with students and how they recognize the sacrifices that their families have made. I have had multiple students on this podcast that back when we were sitting doing this live, would sit across the table from me and talk about their mother and their father in terms and that I've, to be quite blunt with you, never heard my children talk about. I mean, and part of it's this deep, deep respect and this deep, deep rooted gratitude for picking up and leaving a country and literally starting over. So that just know from an educator, I'm just commenting. You don't have to respond to that unless you want to. But from an educator's perspective, it happens all the time. Those children, whether they're telling you or not, they they will talk about it, and it is on their mind, and it is not lost upon them when they get to a certain age to understand what their parents have done, and what and why they did it, why parents did that. But
actually, if I may have a suggestion from from your education standpoint, maybe involve the parents like us, especially like me as a first immigrant. That's they came to this country for school, but they're the first half of the life is probably the other country, and they, even though they claim that they understand, but they don't. In the about American history, the culture, the recognition, the respect, and in many ways. We live in our own world sometimes. So I think the school district like you is a perfect opportunity to involve them and create some more collaboration between the children, their parents, and using your environment, using your resources, and can harmonize that kind of relationship. I think that's can put a really long way to helping the children in a long way, and also helping the parents understand where they come from. That's just some thoughts in my mind.
No, that's a legitimate, very, very astute recommendation that we're always trying. We educators, I should back up a little bit. We attempt to engage parents, particularly in these diverse communities, so that we can understand again, going back to what I said earlier, we can understand the parents' point of view, but not nearly to the extent we should. And Ben, I think we should have a much more robust, less cumbersome way of doing that, so that there's
Yes.
discussions. And so you're right. You would benefit as a parent. That hopefully your child would benefit, and then we as a team of three, the parent, the school, and the child, the student, can make education a much more meaningful experience for the kid, and so that there's not this constant friction. I don't know that I know we kind of got off the off the subject, but that's this. I find this part of the conversation is critical to how we move forward. It's absolutely critical. You know, young children need to be watching their parents how they handled this crisis, and they were. Children have watched. They've watched the adults, and they're going to learn. And they're going to emulate to a certain extent. They're going to emulate that. So, listen, we're going to wrap this up. We've been going at this for quite a while, and I can talk about these topics for a long time. But Katherine, I wanted to end this by just asking you any final thoughts. What have lessons learned within the Asian community? Perhaps what's the Asian community learned from yourself? I mean, learn from themselves. Thoughts?
I'm gonna add two parts. What the Asian community have learned, we could depend on each other in our community and also our community at large. We're not in there, we're not by ourselves and we're not alone. So we don't have to feel like we're isolated, and reach out and talk to people. But the second part of it is the hospitality ring that I'm in. I'm urging and encouraging people to do more, because now that you're getting vaccinated, definitely getting better, the situation, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Make sure you're doing events with meaning and purpose now, because you didn't have contact with your family, or you don't get to travel or vacation. I have a new appreciation on life. I mean, I'm grateful for every single day that I'm alive and be able to deal with these crises. It is a blessing in disguise. So if you are doing events or you're doing gatherings or family things, make it worth it. And for example, Ben, just a quick little thing, he's actually doing gala differently. You know how everyone does galas, dances, fundraisers, all these things. Actually, the chamber is doing a rebound, rebuild, and reunite. So that way it's not just gathering people for the sake of gathering, but they're gathering to help businesses network, to help each other, to generate business, to re-network and reconnect with people again, and to kind of foster that relationship, and then celebrate that we are now able to see each other rather than this little 2D. I can actually physically go out and see someone 3D. I mean, those little things matter.
Yep.
So do things with meaning, gather with meaning, do events with meaning, and have that appreciation of life, because you're not guaranteed tomorrow.
And do them at signature manner, right? Do all
Yes. That too. Let Signature Manor do your event, or call us at Houston Event Planning. Let us do your proms, your events.
I
Let
know.
us make it fun.
But I'd give you a shameless plug.
Thank you.
Ben, any final thoughts, lessons learned that you want to share?
Yeah, I want to echo what Katherine said. It's time to rebuild, rebound, right? And I think it's important to think about the business like Katherine, their business, 87% down in the last year. When the business rebound, rebuild, and think about helping those companies like Katherine's company, the event planning company, helping the restaurant, helping the hotels, and do any little things helping them because they are the ones suffer. And then they help them because we need them, and they need the people's help as well. So I will encourage. That's why the Katherine mentioned our gala. We're going to spend this much dollar. We want to help as much as we can, and hope everyone to step up helping those small businesses who suffered in the last year.
Well, on behalf of the school system that educates the children of all communities, including obviously the Asian community, we appreciate your leadership within your community. I've often heard, and I'm sure it's been said thousands of times, but our country, the United States of America, is made up of thousands and thousands of small communities. And if those thousands and thousands of small communities would take care of themselves and look out for each other and do the things that you guys have been describing, and look beyond skin color, look beyond ethnicity, look beyond language barriers, look beyond all the things that we try to differentiate ourselves by, then our country will be stronger than it has ever been. And I want to express our appreciation to the two of you, and in addition to all of your colleagues and all of the people that you work with to try to help take care of your community. It's yours. It's not mine. It's your community, and it can be a mixture of Asians and African American. It could be everybody, but whatever that community is, we all need to take care of ourselves. Just help each other out. Be a good neighbor. Just be a good neighbor. And so, thank you for your conversation today. I hope those watching or listening got a little bit of a flavor for the Asian community in our district, some of the trials, some of the concerns that we have, that they have, the biases and how that's impacted them. And then the lesson learned, I think, is what Katherine and Ben kind of said, is pulling together, working together, keeping your eye on the light at the end of the tunnel, but also understanding the clear realities of what's going on right now. And so with that, thank you for both of you. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's busy, but I think our community is going to benefit from this discussion. I really do. So this has been HD Chambers, ImpactEd with Alief ISD. Thank you guys. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been an AMP production.